Welcome to the Great Ideas Podcast, where we explore many topics, including leadership, teamwork, relationships, business, politics, pop culture, health, sports, food, and anything else that's a great idea. I'm your host, Barry Moline. Today, we're talking with Vladimir Bushin, negotiation expert, Cialdini certified coach, and professional trainer. Vlad and I discuss the importance of making connections and fostering engagement, both individually and in group settings. For dealing with people in new environments, we talk about the importance of the huddle, where participants introduce themselves by sharing their name, their role, their company, to reduce everyone's anxiety and create comfort. Vlad highlights the role of psychological cues and vulnerability in building connections, especially in negotiations. We share anecdotes illustrating how small acts of openness can lead to meaningful interactions. There's one really cool idea about asking about the bathroom that is particularly effective. Overall, our conversation emphasizes the significance of human connection in both professional and social contexts. Ultimately, engaging with people is intentional, and anyone can do it when you have the tools. At the end of our conversation, Vlad offers something of tremendous value. It's a free coaching session with a focus on negotiation, building relationships, and handling difficult conversations. His email address is in the show notes. Well, welcome, Vlad.
Well, thank you, Barry. It's a very exciting topic, and thank you for having me here.
Good. Today we're talking about making connections and the process of people engaging with each other and doing it in a way that is where people feel welcomed into a conversation, they feel seen in a conversation. And I want to start out with what I think is the most important thing you can do in a group environment when you're just starting out, let's say, a meeting, and that's called the huddle. And this is, imagine you're having a group meeting of about 7 people. And they might be 7 people from different areas of the company. There might be a few people from outside the company. And not everybody knows each other. Most people know 1 or 2 people in the room, but they don't know everybody in the room. And what's important to do in this huddle is to get everybody to go around the room, say their name, say their role, say their company, and just quickly do that. There's no special icebreaker like, what would you name your yacht if you had one? Or what's the name of your pet, or whatever that might be. It's just simple. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your role? And then everybody is starting from the same place. They know who everyone else is in the room. And this idea comes from Atul Gawande. He's the author of a book called The Checklist Manifesto. And Gawande is a surgeon in Boston. And Gawande found that when they were doing surgery, they have a lot of different people in the operating room. You have an anesthesiologist, you have nurses, I don't even know. I have no idea who's in an operating room, but there's lots of different people. And those people change around every shift. So it's not the same team all the time. And what Gawande found was that before stepping into the operating theater, if everybody does that huddle and they say who they are and what they're doing, then there's a significantly greater degree of comfort. And it also stems from an idea of one of our fears. One of our greatest fears is walking into a room and not knowing people. So when you walk into the operating room and you know a couple people, well, that's good. But still, you feel uneasy because you don't know everybody. So when you get introduced to everyone, now that pressure is reduced and everyone feels greater comfort. And what they've found is organizations that do the huddle have higher productivity. And every time I have a business meeting, I make sure that everyone knows each other. We do this little huddle. Whether I'm leading the meeting or not, if we start the meeting and I'm not the leader, but someone else is the leader, and we get into maybe the first item, I'll raise my hand and say, hey, could we step back for a second and everybody introduce themselves and talk about where they're from very quickly? And the leader is like, oh, yeah, let's do that. And everyone always appreciates it. I did it a couple of days ago. I was playing pickleball. And pickleball is a very social sport. You put your paddles off to the side. People come in and they might not know their opponents or even their teammate. And some people on the court knew each other, but not everybody. And I paused before we started the game and I said, hey, let's all introduce ourselves. And we all did. And even though it was something silly like pickleball, we all felt a little bit better about knowing each other and feeling more social with each other. So I find that action, the huddle, as the first thing that I can do to help improve connections in any group dynamic. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A similar thing exists in negotiation. And the reason for this easiness that comes in, it comes from the emotions. So when you meet somebody new, psychologically, subconsciously, you need to make a decision, whether it's a friend or a foe, and you can't even help it. You decide, you make a decision, and whether you become open and vulnerable and feel safe, or you become defensive and you become uneasy. And if there's no clue, you need to find a clue, and you need to make that decision at some point. If you can't make decision, you look at the person and there is no clue, then you kind of like in a frozen state. You don't know whether it's where you put, in which bucket you put, this person. And the act of active and deliberate invitation for sharing kind of the tips that state, because everybody start to introduce themselves and they start to have an experience of sharing, being vulnerable and being accepted, and inevitably it puts everybody in the bucket of friend. And there's a principle of Cialdini, liking. When you're on the liking side, you're pretty much on the upward spiral. So we can talk about this later, but I wanted to note that in negotiation, there's a specific technique, and negotiators have to do it deliberately to release the tension. Imagine you're going into negotiation, a room full of people, and all of them are professionals. Maybe they are tigers of negotiation. They're maybe negotiating every day, and their heads are into numbers and contracts and proposals, and it is tense. And experienced negotiators, what they do, they walk into a room and everybody like up to the top notch, everybody's so professional looking. Negotiator comes in and removes the jacket and puts it and says, well, it's going to be probably a challenging negotiation, but they kind of like make it more casual, to make it more okay for everybody to see it's not a fight, it's actually a friendly conversation. It is so important to make yourself vulnerable first. And if you introduce a huddle, you didn't mention that, but I imagine you said, hey, let's introduce each other. By the way, my name is Vladimir, or my name is Barry. You say that first. You make yourself vulnerable first to show everybody that this is okay to be a little bit vulnerable because we are friends here. It is so crucially important. And there's another story. You mentioned that people really like to be seen, and this is so crucial when you meet for the first time, because essentially whatever we do, how we come across, we want to leave people clues about who we are. And we want to tell them who we are. Unfortunately, people do not have time to notice. We are so busy. We are always thinking about contracts and numbers and the plans and deadlines. We don't have time to connect. And introducing a huddle is a perfect opportunity. And coming from agile space, not only we say what's your name and your role, we also say what's your hobby or what's your favorite meal. And that casuality there let people connect easier, because it's much easier to connect with somebody who has the same hobby or has the same favorite food rather than with somebody who is in the same role, because all the roles are different. But also sharing the name, it's important, as we know in Cialdini liking principle. When you know that the other person of the same name, it is also connecting. Isn't that fascinating, Barry?
It is fascinating. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, something you said about friend versus foe is I'm really curious about. What are the cues that we find or that we look for to determine if somebody is on our side or against us? And you were using the example of negotiation, which is already probably a little higher tense situation. What are those cues, the friend or foe cues?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because negotiators deliberately have to create that situation when they actually send so powerful cues to people that they understand it right away. For example, removing the jacket, making yourself vulnerable, starting from something like, "Hey, this is my first time here. I'm not really familiar with this space." When you say that, you actually make yourself a little bit vulnerable. Not necessarily in negotiation space. You are still professional. You still know what you're doing. But you may say, "I'm a little bit confused. Where's the bathroom?" And when you say that, people want to help you. And when people want to help you, they put you automatically in the friend zone.
Ah,
It's psychological, and it's actually called the Colombo effect.
uh-huh.
The Colombo effect is, you probably remember the famous series when the Colombo appeared to be a little bit confused and not really understanding, and in the end he says, "By the way, there's one more question." and then he would
Exactly.
ask the most important question.
So I love that where's the bathroom question, because what's happening is you're asking someone for well, to help you, right? To assist you. And even though it's something as silly as directions to the bathroom, they're an expert in the directions to the bathroom. So they, as an expert, are helping you, the novice, find the bathroom, right? And there's a feeling of confidence that I'm offering to you to help you find the bathroom. I'm going to be very confidently
Yeah.
telling you which way to go.
There is also another very important aspect here, psychological aspect. When you ask about the bathroom, you make yourself a little bit embarrassed because it's an embarrassing question. It's very personal. You almost like put them in your friend zone and say, do you know where's the bathroom? You lower your voice so that you trust them that they will not disclose it to everybody. And even though you may say it for the whole room, it still feels like a personal question. But the thing is, when you make yourself a little bit embarrassed, you make others feel more okay. And that is crucially important, to make others feel more okay than you.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you the story that I saw many, many years ago. It was a photograph, and then underneath the photograph was just a caption. And that's the whole story. So my entire memory of it is just seeing this photograph. And it was a picture of President Ronald Reagan. And he was standing, showing something in his hand to a man and a woman. That was the picture. So he's got his hands in front of him, and the man and the woman are curiously looking at his hands. And the caption underneath was, it was an official White House picture. And it was the moment that Reagan was meeting his future in-laws. So his daughter, Patty, was getting married. And the in-laws, or the future in-laws, came to the White House to meet Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan, the parents of the woman that their son was going to marry. And in the normal world, we would just, if this was happening, we would go out to dinner with somebody, or we would go to their house, and it would just be like that. But in this case, they had to go to the White House to do it. And they were meeting with the frickin' president of the United States. So there's a little bit of I don't know, it's not tension so much, it's not negative tension, but there's a little bit of anxiety because obviously you're in this place. So Reagan took out his hearing aid, which was a very small hearing aid, and he had it in his hand, and he was showing the hearing aid to his future in-laws and talking about the advances in technology, and that he was able to get this advanced hearing aid because he's president of the United States. And look at and he was telling them how small it was and how effective it was. And they were really interested. And Reagan was a master communicator, but it did more or less what you're talking about. It created this vulnerability for the president. He's just a regular person. He puts on his pants just like everyone else does. And he was talking about this, he was hard of hearing. So he was indicating that and talking about this cool hearing aid. And they were all just talking about the hearing aid and not talking about what it's like to be the most powerful person in the world or whatever that might be. And I think about that a lot in these kind of situations that you're talking about. I can't say it's deliberate. The way you described it, I loved it because you really dissected the importance of vulnerability. And I think about how important it is to learn about someone else, find out what they're interested in. I'm going to use that bathroom tactic. But whatever it is, just doing something that shows you're an actual human and you want to connect with them in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that everybody wants to feel confident and everybody wants to feel okay. And so many people say, Barry, how can I feel more confident? I'm not feeling confident. You're talking about communication, and I want to meet people and feel confident. But the problem is that you don't have to be confident. You actually need to feel embarrassed for successful connection. And I will tell you a story. I had a friend, he was my tenant over, pre-pandemic time, and he is a coach, and he is a master of connecting with people. His name is Patrick, and Patrick, sometimes I run into him into a store, and he would stand and speak to someone he just met in the store, and that happened a couple of times. And one time we went together to a coffee. Right across the street was a coffee shop, and I wanted to talk to him, and I wanted to ask him, how he connects. And we sit down with a cup of coffee, and there was cafeteria full of people. It was like Sunday morning or something, or Saturday morning. And I said, I want to grab something. I forgot to grab a glass of water, whatever. And I stepped out for 30 seconds. I came back, and I found Patrick speaking to our table neighbors, like very engaged, and they're laughing, and they're so engaged, and they're so connected. And I'm like, Patrick, what happened? Like, I stepped out for 30 seconds. And he said, well, this guy had such a nice hat. And I just asked him about this hat. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. And so you ask about the hat, and that started the conversation. And he said, of course, because people want to be seen. They leave clues. So this guy had a special hat, and that was unusual. And I noticed that, and I said, oh, you have such an unusual hat. And he started to tell me the story about this hat, where he bought it, why is this way, how it reflects his character, and he started to share something deep about his life right away. And I was like astonished. I was like, wow, is it that easy to meet people? And he said, yes, because people leave clues. They want, it's like, imagine we all walk with a big button with the title, press me, push me, but nobody pushes. We wear a nice hat, we wear a special jacket, we put something on the wall so people see that we have a picture behind us with some, tree and forest. All of this communicates who we are. And connection on the identity level, recognizing who people are is super important.
By the way, those trees and forests you're talking about is me, right? Is that because I have trees and forests pictures behind me? Well, you have these wonderful diplomas from all the education you've received. I just have pictures of places that I've been and so on, and no diplomas anywhere. Wait, my diplomas are somewhere else. They're over there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's called positioning. I also have trees and forests, but they are on different walls.
Yeah.
Pleasing my eye.
Well, so would you consider Patrick to be a connector, somebody who is easygoing and can start up a conversation with people almost anywhere he is?
Absolutely. Well, he's a coach, and even pre-pandemic time, imagine 5 years ago, he would easily connect with people, and he would be like, you have a really nice picture. And he would like be so intense. It put so much energy, and he would be like really showing the curiosity like very intensely. And at the same time, it was very positive. Like he would make a joke. He was really good at joking. And I think I learned a lot from him in terms of how people connect. I kind of understood the mechanics of this. And please bear with me. I'm not really an exact that was not my natural ability and skill and talent, because I think like before maybe 10 years ago, I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of barriers to break the ice, make a connection. I couldn't speak to people on the street, and maybe that because of my background, because I am an immigrant, that there's a lot of bad emotions associated with breaking the ice. In Russia, culture a little bit different. People are very, very close-up defensive at first, but when you break the ice, they become very open. In the United States, it's a little bit the opposite. You can break the ice with pretty much anyone quickly, but then you've hit that wall and people really don't let you go deeper, and that's a different kind of problem. You kind of need to understand how to do this. But because of my culture, breaking ice, just start speaking with someone, it was a big problem. And I think I learned a lot from Patrick.
So I have a reflection on that. I have a friend, his name is Tom. His full name is Tom Tart, or Tommy Tart. It sounds like a radio personality, but Tommy is a connector like Patrick. One time we had played golf, and we were sitting in the restaurant after the round, and we sat down at a table, and I said, I'm going to go to the bathroom and wash my hands. I came back, and not only was Tom engaged in conversation with another table, like your Patrick, he had moved us to the other table. He picked up my stuff, he picked up his stuff, and he said, Barry, come on over here. We're sitting with these folks now. It's like, oh, you've got to be kidding. Tom. And Tom was a football player in college, and the two guys that he was sitting with were both retired football players, linemen for the Kansas City Chiefs. And they were huge guys, and they somehow connected while I was, in the bathroom for 2 minutes. Who knows? He may have looked at those guys and saw that they were, big guys and said, hey, you guys play football or something like that. And they were like, well, yeah, actually we did play football. And so who knows? But Tom reaches out to a lot of people. And I I said to him afterwards, I said, Tom, how do you do it? How is it that whenever you walk into a room, you're immediately friends with everyone? And his answer stunned me. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, come on, Tom. You saw what happened there with lunch, but that's happened. It happened over here and it happened there and it happened there. You know, you have friends everywhere and where you didn't have them a minute ago. And he said, I still don't see it. So I said to him, I'm going to watch you and see what it is you do. So I started to watch him. We would get together and we'd do our normal social activities, and I would just see how he interacts with people. And he did one thing consistently, and that is he always asked people about where they were from. Hey, where are you from? Hey, I'm Tom. I'm from Orlando. Where are you from? And it was always to get to know that person a little bit better, because if he had been to that place, if you said, oh yeah, I'm from Kansas City, he'd say, I was in Kansas City once. Is that barbecue restaurant, Jimmy's Barbecue still there? Because, he's actually trying to figure out because he liked Jimmy's Barbecue. And people will either know about it or they won't. But nevertheless, he'll then say, well, what kind of barbecue do you like? And whatever, it goes on because people love to talk about where they're from. And he doesn't approach it from the perspective of, well, where are you from? You're not from here. He approaches it from the perspective of I want to learn about that place and I want to learn about you. So he's fully engaged with wanting to know about you. And it is legitimate. There's no barrier. He literally wants to know about you and make that connection. And he's not trying to get anything from you either. So it got me sort of thinking about the opposite situation. And why is it that we don't approach people? And there's actually some research on this. It's called the liking gap. And there's a lot of research on forcing people to go into a crowd and introduce themselves to others. Maybe shy people going and doing that. And what researchers have found is that there's two reasons why we're not outgoing. And one reason is that we think we're not that interesting. I don't have a lot to offer to people. I don't have a lot to say here, whatever. I'm just not bringing a lot to the table. And the other thing is we think other people are not that interesting. So because we think that, we just think, I'll just shut up and I won't try to cross that bridge. But the reality is the opposite is true. We have lots of things that we can share with folks, and other people have lots of things that they can share with us. And if we just do what Patrick does or what Tom does and just engage a little bit, and I like that idea of seeing someone's hat and saying, that is a cool hat. Tell me about that hat. And people are proud. If you're a hat wearer, then you're proud of your hat. You're doing that deliberately, right? So that's the reason why. And all we have to do to get over that liking gap is just to make the effort, is just to do that Patrick or Tommy Tart thing. And when I'm about to go into a crowded room of people, I literally think to myself, okay, be Tom Tart. And that's my cue to try to be outgoing in a place where I may not know a lot of people.
Yeah, it's definitely an effort. And it takes courage to do that, especially if you have some maybe negative experience in the past, and especially if you feel anxiety or someone would tell you a story about negative experience, you may have an anxiety, and just saying, hey, I'm from Orlando, where are you from? It takes courage because subconsciously you may feel that it's not relevant, and people will be surprised unpleasantly, and they would be bothered, they would be defensive, And all of this paints a picture in our mind that it's going to be an unpleasant experience that we need to go through. And that throws at us into unsafe space. And by all means, we want to stay safe. And the safest thing is to stay muted, and it's to stay quiet and being unnoticed. We don't want to be exposed to people, to their judgment, to their reaction. And going there and putting yourself out, making yourself embarrassed, actually takes a lot of courage. And that is based on how we essentially perceive the reality. Pretty much it's our beliefs that holds us up. And our beliefs keep us safe. And somebody like Tommy, they had so many positive experiences that they are legitimately saying, "What are you talking about? That's all natural," because for them there is that investment of themselves into a conversation is so small. They have such a high self-esteem that even if people respond to them not as exactly as he expects, then he doesn't lose a lot of self-esteem because there is a lot of experience. But for people who have low self-esteem, they expect something bad happen. It's very hard for them to make this first step, and we need to think about what causes that. And maybe sometime during our life we make that connection, and we call it belief. So we believe, and belief is something that we don't question. It's a relationship between things that we don't question, and we take it for granted. Like in the morning, sun goes up, right? So if I do 10 push-ups, I will get tired. Like it is so natural for us, we don't even notice that. But the same things we think about connection. So if I start speaking, I will get stuck. Like so many people saying, well, what do I do if I get stuck, if I don't know what to say? This means that they have a belief that when they put themselves out, they will be like on stage, like they need to make a speech and they don't know what to say. And they don't have time to prepare. It's their belief. But the belief is only formed by unverified experience. So once you start looking into what belief is, once you start questioning it, you can actually get rid of that belief, and you can actually form a different belief. So
How do you break that pattern?
So you actually need to question yourself. Is that true that every time I connect with people, I need to smoothly talk for an extended period of time? Is that true? And then you need to have some other experience, like you see Tommy, and Tommy say, "Hey, I'm from Orlando. Where are you from?" And that's it. And he shuts up and listens. And
Yeah.
someone like Patrick does it even shorter. He's like, "Nice picture." And that's it. You don't need to say anything else. Or like,
Yeah.
"Beautiful hat." And that's it. He stops there.
I was going to ask you how to engage people in conversation, and you're saying, I think you're saying, just pick up on anything. It's okay. Try anything. You never know what is going to get people engaged in a conversation.
Yeah,
just state the obvious.
Sometimes it's just a wave of a hand, or maybe like raising your eyebrows. That's what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're talking about somebody's hat or talking about their favorite barbecue in Kansas City, that's at a superficial level. Is there a way to get deeper into a conversation?
Yeah, definitely there is a way to deepen your conversation, but of course everything should start from something small. So we need to understand how to start, because you cannot really come to someone and ask a question about the meaning of life. It would be too much.
Yeah.
You got to start from some small dopamine hit, if you would. So, and that's important. And
you never know. You may find a deeper connection. Maybe you both have something in common, and you can then go down that road. Or maybe there's that your conversation partner knows something that you've always wanted to learn about, so you can ask more questions about that. I imagine that's a
Yeah,
way into a deeper conversation.
I actually
Yeah.
wanted to add something important here. So many people actually leave the connection to a chance and they take it for granted if the connection happens or not. So what happens to people, and I was one of them maybe 10 years ago, because with some people magically I connect so easily and with others I cannot connect at all. And I was thinking, well, there is maybe something wrong with these people. But no, there was something wrong with me. And here's why. Connecting with people is a skill. And if you do not have a skill, you're being led by other people. You are a follower. If you meet the people who are great connectors, like Tommy, you connect easily with them, and you're wondering like, oh, that was so easy, that was effortless. And there are other people who are not connectors, and they do not lead you, and then you feel like it's super hard, and they're defensive. There is something wrong with these people, but no, it's just you don't have a skill. So the question is, who is really responsible for connection? Who is responsible?
Good question. Who is responsible? Tell me. Tell me.
Yeah.
Do you have to take responsibility for your part?
Well, if you're not responsible for connection, you live an irresponsible life because then you leave it to a chance.
Yeah.
If you delegate that responsibility to someone else, what happens?
It won't happen.
It will happen if they want it.
If they want it. Yeah. Yeah. But if it's not being said, it's just a passive situation. So if you want to make a connection, then you have to be a little bit assertive. You have to actually say the words. You have to reach out a teeny bit to start the process.
Well, imagine if you are a leader in an organization. Let's say you're a director of your group, and you have new people hired and coming into your group. Whose responsibility is to connect?
Well, it's your responsibility as a leader.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
connecting to people is a leadership skill.
Yeah. So in the Cialdini principles, we talked about liking, or you mentioned that a few minutes ago. That principle, the process is to not talk about yourself, but to learn about someone else, to ask them about themselves. We all like to talk about ourselves. And when people do talk about ourselves, and when our conversation partners ask us questions, then we walk away from a conversation having just talked about ourselves, saying, I really like Vlad. I don't know what it is, but I just do. And it's, you were interested in me. And then as a result of that, hopefully I get interested in you too. But nevertheless, it's because you took such an interest in me, your vibe, your eagerness to get to know me, that kind of just rubs off. It creates an atmosphere around our conversation. And I feel a better connection because you're interested in me. You're trying to find out more about what's going on in my world. So that dovetails well with the Cialdini principle of liking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could tell you that I'm a negotiation coach, and many, if not most of the clients actually choose me as a coach, not because I am brilliant, not because I am best in the industry, not because I am the longest in the field, but because I just understood them a little bit deeper. Because I took time to understand what's going on, what they're going through, and what they feel about it.
Yeah.
And in the negotiation practice community where we practice negotiation, there's one of the hosts is a host of reflective listening. And he's a professional listener on a hotline. He used to be. And I think he joined, he's a former police officer as well. And he has a practical experience listening on suicide hotline. And one of the rules there is that, we kind of formed this rule as part of a negotiation practice community, but one of the rules there is that you don't exist. It's not about you at all. Even though they start engaging you, the caller start engaging you, say, what should I do? How do I do this? And what would your advice be? So you're not an advisor there. You're saying, like, it sounds like you really need an advice right now. You actually reflecting of what they're saying and what do you feel about this? Or you can say, it feels like you really get stuck, and leave it there, and being quiet and being comfortable with the silence. And the caller always finds the way to talk about it, how they get stuck, what is their dilemma, and how they feel about it, and that gives them more clue about what to do next. And often it ends up with a sigh of relief. We say that sigh of relief is when people come from emotional churn to rational thinking. So they would do, and then after that, they start to say, well, I guess I need to go to gym and train, or I guess I need to get back to work. I guess I need to talk to my colleagues, and probably I need to apologize. And they create that plan to get out of their trouble. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that is fascinating. Yeah, I love that. And the important part is letting the silence happen so that people have a moment to self-reflect. Something you said a few minutes ago, and we probably should wrap up, and then we'll get back together and talk about some other Cialdini principles. You and I both as Cialdini certified coaches. You mentioned the dopamine hit. And there's a connection that I've learned between making these initial connections to people, or small connections to people, and getting that dopamine hit, and happiness. And what I mean there is really simple stuff, like you go to the coffee store, you go to a Starbucks, and one of the things that Starbucks does is they ask you your name so they can put your name on the cup, right? And that's part of engaging you in a conversation a little bit, because we all love our names and we like saying our names, and then they're using our name, and we feel at home at this place that's using our name. So you get your coffee, or maybe it's something special like a latte, or I don't even know the names of their crazy drinks, but some kind of specialty drink, and take a sip, and then go back to the counter and say, excuse me, did you make my drink? And often people are like, oh no, what's wrong with the drink? And I'll say, this is made so well. I just love it. Thank you. And then I just turn and walk away. I just drop this little compliment bomb on people and appreciate them. And then hopefully they feel a little bit better themselves. They're feeling good. I feel good for giving them the compliment. And we don't have to engage in a long conversation. But these engagements are called weak ties. It's sort of like Tommy or Patrick just asking somebody about their hat or where they're from. Just very short conversations, and maybe they don't expand into a longer conversation. That's all right. You make these weak ties when you're engaging or learning or making someone else feel better. You also feel better. You also get that dopamine hit. And it creates, I think, in the process you were describing, a new belief system that when I reach out, I feel better. And that's how happiness gets tied to these small reach outs. Because when they happen, if you do a couple of them during a day, by the end of the day, you feel like, hey, I feel good. I engaged with people. And it may have just been for seconds, but still, I engaged with people. It was a good day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you feel like you're surrounded by friends as well, because those weak ties, when you just wave a hand to someone, even if you cross the street and somebody stop and you say thank you feel more like you're surrounded by friends. And also, when you go back to the counter, like when I hear the story, I'm thinking like, I would feel anxiety doing that. Going back to the counter and ask a question, who made my drink? I would feel like I need to go over myself to do that. But it's like low barrier, and you know that they will answer you. You know that they will not tell you something rude because, they're at the service. Even then, I feel a little bit of anxiety, but I know that I will succeed. Like logical, I'm thinking, but even then, emotionally, anxiety is there. But when I say that, right after I say that, and they say me or whatever, or what's a problem, and I deliver that compliment, that's a dopamine hit, and that rewrites the story. That rewrites the story, that gives me rewarded for being courageous. And then all of a sudden I start to feel free. All of a sudden I start to feel, oh, I'm not constrained by my fears. I can overcome them. And that dopamine hit continues because I feel like I'm bigger than myself. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you connected it to even just a wave on the street to a complete stranger. You let somebody go in traffic and they wave, you wave, and that's okay. And you still get that dopamine hit because you've had this little engagement with folks and it changes your belief system. Yeah. Well, Vlad, this has been great. We've talked a lot about connecting with folks, and I think we've covered some really cool ideas. I've learned a ton. The whole concept of changing your belief system is not something that I had ever thought about. I didn't think about the pattern of taking those actions, actually connecting to my sort of umbrella belief system. And thank you for pointing that out because I don't know, I just never made that connection to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I was always focused on the little actions and not recognizing that, yeah, I think it has changed my belief system over time by doing a lot of these little actions. And I still have to force myself to do them because I wouldn't say that it's not natural, but I think I have a tendency toward not doing them. So when I'm in one of those situations, I think, do it, do something that connects or that just waves or that says, hey, or whatever it might be. And I'm not sure why, but I have that constant reminder, to be Tom Tart, be Patrick, and do the outreach. Because even though it's not natural to me, forcing myself to do it, it seems as though it always works out better.
Yeah. It frees you up, and I mean, you will see more opportunities, and you will become inside. You will feel free to do more things, and that's important. So every time you feel anxiety, I mean, I want to say that to all the people who may be watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, that in general, if you feel anxiety, you need to ask yourself, okay, I'm feeling anxiety. What exactly the connection here? What is causing the anxiety? For example, I feel anxiety because I don't want to come to this counter and say a compliment. And then the anxiety comes from the fact that I think that it's going to go wrong, right? But at that moment, you need to ask yourself one simple question: is that true? Is that true that the connection between saying a compliment turns into a bad thing? True. So when you start questioning your beliefs, then you start rewriting your story. Then you start to get out of those limiting beliefs, and you can do it deliberately yourself. And I understand we need to wrap it up because we speak a lot today and they covered a lot. We didn't get into how to build the deeper connection, and I hope that in the next episode, if there be one, then we can talk about the 7 levels of nurturing. This is the 7 levels of mindset that you can lead the others through in order to go to what really matters to people and getting into meaningful conversation that they would appreciate. And again, this is a responsibility. It's not a trick. It is not manipulation. It is a responsibility to build deeper connections. And who is responsible for that? Well, if you're a leader, you're responsible for that. And leadership skills are really important everywhere. It's important in family. It's important at work. It's important in social setting. It's important in negotiation as well. So if you want to learn some of the small secrets of negotiators on how to build the deeper connection, how to go through 7 levels of nurturing, I would be happy to talk about it.
Well, you've just teased that next episode. So we'll arrange that and we'll have you back on to talk about those. Thanks, Vlad.
So much, Barry.
Yeah, it's been great talking with you, and I look forward to talking about the 7 levels.
Sounds good. Barry, thank you so much.
Okay, bye. Thanks to Vladimir Bushin for being our guest today. And thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch, or if you have an interesting topic and you know someone you think would be a great guest on the show, send me an email at barry@barrymoline.com. And please leave a 5-star review, which helps others find their way to the Great Ideas Podcast.